I did want to hit on the biggest story of the week since we've been on.
Okay.
Was what happened with the NBA. And it was nothing that happened on the court. We'll have some time to get some of that at another time. But the biggest story was the NBA gambling scandal that took place. And this is one of those where it was such a bombshell because I'm sitting there and I was actually doing rehab on my shoulder and I was scrolling through my phone as I'm getting some stim. And all of a sudden I see, Terry Rozier arrested in relation to an FBI, investigation. And it's like, ooh, man, a player's fixing games potentially. And then you see Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, is coming out with a press conference. I'm like, man, that feels huge. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, Chauncey Billups, it comes out that he's getting arrested as well, a current head coach in the NBA. And so you're thinking then Damon Jones comes out, a former player. This is every sports commissioner's worst nightmare.
Totally.
And I think this is a big reason why every major sports league really did push back on the gambling until they said, you know what? The money is just too good to pass up. Every source of revenue we can grab onto, we're going to do it. And it's a huge opportunity for them to make a ton of money. And this is always what they were worried about. Anybody that was anti-gambling that said, hey, we do not want to legalize gambling. This was the exact scenario that everyone warned about, but no one listened to.
Yeah, I mean, everything top to bottom about this story is incredible, and it's going to I think the next 3 weeks or a month are going to be even more incredible, because if you think it was just a 3-person operation, you're out of your mind. We saw people connected to the NBA at the deepest levels. You have guys who coached and played. You have NBA Hall of Famer in Chauncey Billups, right? Terry Rozier's still in the locker room, and now we're hearing La Cosa Nostra, which is the Italian mob, and that's out of control. Here's the problem, though. When you subject these players, every 5 minutes there's a commercial about DraftKings and FanDuel. How do you expect these guys to not get involved in it? It's completely impossible to get them so close to it and think that you're going to keep them out. Now, the scary part about this is, I think it's going to get significantly deeper. We're going to see more. They're going to start digging into different leagues. And I think a lot of this tailors over to what we've been talking about. You see stuff like I'm a big proponent of it, and I talk to you about it every week. I think the officiating is the worst I've ever seen it. Now you start to think, does one bleed into the other? Is it a coincidence that the officiating is the worst it's ever been at a time where the gambling is the biggest it's ever been? And it's super scary because once you start to compromise the integrity of the sport, you no longer have a sport. You have WWE. Yeah. And that's something we can't afford to have, because then people completely lose trust in your league. Adam Silver, I think, far and away the worst commissioner in sports. It doesn't shock me at all that he is the first one to go down with it, and now they're scrambling left and right to try to save themselves. Yeah, I mean, this was his first interview, at a game in a tunnel where Cassidy Hubbard, who I used to work with at ESPN, tracked him down. Here's what Adam Silver had to say.
And Terry Rozier was allowed to keep playing after an NBA investigation ruled that there was no NBA rules violated. What do you make of that decision now amid the FBI's allegations against him?
So what happened was, because bets were placed through legalized legal betting companies, they picked up aberrational behavior around a particular game in March of 23. And so that was brought to our attention by the regulators and the betting companies. We then looked into that situation and were very transparent about it. And while there was that aberrational betting, we frankly couldn't find anything. Terry at the time cooperated. He gave the league office his phone. He sat down for an interview. And we ultimately concluded that there was insufficient evidence, despite that aberrational behavior, to move forward. We then worked directly with the law enforcement, as they said at the press conference, that the league has been cooperating. And so that was obviously over 2 years ago. So the federal government has subpoena power, can threaten to put people in jail, can do all kinds of things that a league office can't do. So we've been working with them since then. And of course, what they announced yesterday was an indictment. So 2.5 years later, he still hasn't been convicted of anything, in fairness to Terry. Obviously, it doesn't look good, but he's now been put on administrative leave. And so, there's a balance here of protecting people's rights and investigating. And as I said, we've been working with the government, and they have extraordinary powers that a league office doesn't have.
But ultimately, Adam Silver does not give you a ton.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure I'm not the pious guy who here and says, I told you, because I'm somebody who likes talking about this point spread. I think, I even gamble a little bit I think it's everything in moderation, whether it's drinking, whether it's, a gambling, something like this, because as our country has become more liberal in some of the things like marijuana, like gambling, things that never had been. Those were always very taboo. As we've gotten there, I'm okay with that and having it put on personal responsibility, having those personal freedoms. But this is the risk you run the same way that you do with alcohol. I mean, how many stories in the NFL have we seen where an NBA and baseball and everything where you see tragic car accidents, you see players getting DUIs, you see players doing really stupid things. I think this is a part of the territory that comes with it. The difference is those don't impact the integrity of the game. And that's what concerns me the most, because that's when fans possibly check out and say, all right, I've seen enough. And worse than, having these scandals is having fans say, all right, well, I'm not watching anymore because I think it's rigged.
And now a lot of fans are starting to say things like, I've lost a ton of money on Terry Rozier's games in the last couple of years. I'm going to take him to court. And how do you fight that? You know what I mean? Yeah, it's an incredible thing. But when you're playing such high stakes games, and I don't even mean high stakes like the NBA, which is the highest of stakes. I mean, the amounts that are being gambled on these games versus the inordinate amount that the players make, it's not even like comparable. So like you think a guy like Jonte Porter, right? Think about a guy like him. He's Michael Porter Jr.'s brother. He was banned from the league last year. Guy's probably making $400K. So like to a normal guy, that's a ton of money. But to Jonte Porter, it's $400,000 or it's $3 million if he just starts tanking things during the year. And a lot of these guys, and this is something we talked about, the college sports rule, that they look like they've walked back a bit. That's what you told me about. I hope you can explain it right after this. But for the people who aren't going to make, like a guy like me who spent 5 minutes there, it's not life-changing money. For a Jonte Porter, $400,000 isn't life-changing money, but you can go ahead and get in bed with a guy like this who says, I'll give you $25,000 to give me the under tonight, and we're just going to put a ton of action on you. They're saying that they have records of $200,000 winnings being brought to Terry Rozier's house. Now, Terry Rozier was making a ton.
Well, see, that's what, and Chauncey Billups made $100 million in his career as a player. So where is the money? That to me is one of the most egregious violations of just how dumb could you be to go for a couple extra million, even if it was $1 million, which I think is probably on the high end.
Right.
Where is your just general IQ to say, you know what, maybe this isn't worth it? Well, you're a head coach in the NBA.
That brings us back to exactly what you were talking about before, and that's why I'm a big believer in that. It's not a dumb or smart thing. It really is a sickness. These guys he got nothing to gain making a couple of $100K for Terry Rozier. He probably spends that on a vacation, twice or three times a year with his family. It really is. It's a problem these guys have, and it's the rush and it's the chase, and that's the biggest problem with it. It's not a fact that they need the money. I don't
think these scandals are going away. I think you're going to see more players get in trouble. We've already seen it at the college game. We've seen some players, get in trouble for gambling. The NCAA, ironically, the day before this scandal broke, the NCAA came out with a rule which said they were going to allow college athletes to bet on professional sports, not college sports. And I think the line of thinking was the NCAA didn't want to have to deal with a player getting in trouble for betting on an NFL or NBA game. Like if it found out, because we've seen some of those too, and they just don't want to deal with it. So they're like, all right, we'll just take that off the table. Now, after pushback from conference commissioners, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, they said, we think this is a bad idea. The NCAA has tabled that. They've delayed that decision, which I think is smart, but they're looking at it the same as the personal responsibility. Well, it's legal in most states that these players play in. They're not, as long as they're not gambling in their own sport, we're okay with it. It's a professional level, but I don't know how you police all this, and it's not going to go away anytime soon.
And a guy like Greg Sankey, of all the
he's the most powerful commissioner in sports.
He had to get out in front of it because theoretically the universities in the SEC are NFL factories.
Right.
So a lot of these freshmen and juniors are watching their junior and senior teammates go to the league, and it doesn't seem like it'd be a criminal thing. It almost seems like a victimless crime. But tell me Danny Cannell graduates, and I'm a sophomore, and I call Dan and say, Dan, how's your shoulder feeling? Oh, you're a little banged up today?
Right.
All right, cool.
Or you don't even have to call and ask. You're behind the scenes.
That's it.
You're in the training room. You walk in there. Hey, what's wrong with you? Hey, they'll give you information. Hey, Cannell or whoever mispracticed today.
That's what I'm saying.
That's valuable information.
Like these LSU kids, hypothetically, or the Ohio State kids, or the Penn State kids, any one of these universities, Florida State kids who are watching their teammates go to the league every year, and they're homies more than they are like, they don't look up to each other anymore. They're buddies. They're getting on the phone. They're just chopping it up. And just in conversation, my hamstring's a little toasted. Man, I extended a little bit last game, blah, blah. It doesn't seem like insider trading, but at the end of the day, if someone looks into it, it could be a thing. You know what I mean? And I think the NCAA did a good thing by stepping back on that. Let's reassess it maybe later down the road. I don't think there's any way to really police it properly. It's inevitable that something bad's going to happen from it, but we'll see what happens. A lot of these people have been given a ton of power now.